Hello everyone, welcome back to Naomi's Bookshelf. Today we're going to do my July wrap-up. So in July, I think I read a total of 19 books, which was a lot better than I thought I had, to be honest. I definitely struggled for part of the month, and then at a certain point I just quit the pressure. I quit forcing myself to read, and then I just was like, okay, it is what it is. I'm going to just read what I want, essentially. And so I did. But at a certain point, I was forcing myself to read things I did not feel like. So after that point, I felt like a lot better. So even though 19 books is really well done for a good number, I'm going to be very happy with that number. I have done a lot better in the last few months, so I'm kind of holding myself to a normal standard comparatively. Anyways, let's get into the books I've read. I'm going to talk about my Jane Austen July TBR first, and we're gonna kind of do a overall review of what I actually read for that, and just go over the prompts essentially. So for Jane Austen's non-novel prompt, I was going to read The Beautifull Cassandra. However, I couldn't mark that on Goodreads without marking her entire like little black book or little black classic. So Milena from Milena Reads kindly sent me contents of her entire book for that little thing. So I marked down and read everything from that little book. So I read Jack and Alice, Henry and Eliza. I'm gonna find the other ones so I can talk about them. The Beautifull Cassandra, and then I also read From a Young Lady in Distressed Circumstances to Her Friend, From a Young Lady Very Much in Love to Her Friend, and a letter from a young lady whose feelings are too strong for her judgment led her into the commission of errors from which her heart disapproved. Very long titles. And I also just really want to mention how much I connected with Jane Austen on misspelling friend every time, because that was me as a kid. I always misspelled friend in the exact same way. Anyways, I really enjoyed reading those juvenilia. I felt like it really lent itself well to showing me the future of Jane Austen. I definitely didn't love every single second of it, but at the same time, I recognized the genius of it, and I was like, this could have grown up into an amazing author, which she did. And also I was like, things could have, like, Jane Austen could have written so many more amazing novels had she lived to, you know, like so many more years. So I was really excited to have read them, and I was really appreciative of those short stories, or even those little poems, essentially, which was The Beautifull Cassandra, and those little letters, which were just so hilarious to read. And I definitely understood why I like Lady Susan so much, because it's very similar, except for Lady Susan is a full book of letters. So I really enjoyed reading some Jane Austen's juvenilia this year. So I talked about reading Mansfield Park in my mid-month wrap-up, and I also read Persuasion. This one I read with Jackie Reads and Writes, so I will link her down below, along with Milena. And this one I really enjoyed. This is my favorite Jane Austen novel, and of course 5 stars. However, when I was reading this one, I was feeling pressured to read the books I was forced to read, like forcing myself to read. So I was not loving it as much. So it's still a 5-star read from me. The ending always gets me, but I was definitely struggling to pick it up. And I think it's just something where it was just a me kind of moment. And I'm really regretting that I had that with Jane Austen. So anyways, it was a sad time, but I love this book. I love Anne Elliot and Frederick Wentworth. I love how they are connecting and struggling to connect, how they have miscommunications, and how they are making each other jealous in unintentional ways or intentional ways. And I think it's just great. I love this one so much in normal life, even if it's not this July. So I was glad to reread it at last. So for reading a contemporary of Jane Austen, I ended up reading some love letters because I was feeling too much pressure to read Mary Wollstonecraft, and I just couldn't handle it, the pressure at least. And I will read that one day, I promise. So this one, I ended up picking up the letters of Maria Bronte. And I have read those before with our Fierce Women's Book Club, but I ended up rereading them. I was going to read Mary Wollstonecraft's letters, but I saw Maria Bronte's and I was like, that will work. It's the same time period, and that's the whole point, to read someone's work from the same time period. So I just read her letters again, which were great. I had read them before, and that's kind of just what I needed with my migraines and with my emotional stress, essentially, that was contributing to my migraines. So I just read those. And then for my retelling, because I was having stress that I was placing on myself because of retellings, I was like, I don't want to read a retelling. I don't want to read anything that I haven't read before. I ended up picking up my Pride and Prejudice graphic novel because I figured it's a retelling in the sense that someone is retelling the story through a graphic novel form. So this one, just quickly put this one up here. 1 second. This one is very fun and very quick to read. It is very simple and very short. I think it's just really easy to read, and I read it in like an hour and a half. Maybe that's long for me, but I was like, I just need to read something, and for this prompt, even though my brain was like, we don't want to read anything. So I just quickly read this, although I will say, you can definitely tell that Marvel commissioned this. The art style, at least, feels very like, I don't know, superhero style, which is totally fine. It was just very interesting to me how it felt that way. Let me see if I can, does that make sense? Like, this feels superhero-like, or yeah, Batman-like. Not Batman, because Batman's not Marvel, but anyways, it was good, and I do recommend this graphic novel if anyone's interested in a Pride and Prejudice graphic novel. I think this is a great one, but I just needed a retelling of some sort, so I picked this one off of my shelves as I have read it before, and it was quick and easy, and that was what I was going for because I really wanted to just knock these prompts off of my bucket list for the month of July. And I have completed Jane Austen July because I also then had watched the movies. So I did end up watching the 1995 version of Pride and Prejudice, and I ended up watching the Jane Austen book club, which I really enjoyed both of them, although the Jane Austen book club was definitely 2005. I mostly watched it for nostalgia, but my mom watched it with me, and she was like, this is really, really inappropriate at times. And I'm like, I know, but I really liked it. So I really enjoyed it. Yes, I really enjoyed that movie, even though it's very loosely based on Jane Austen. My last physical book to talk about is The Bluebird and the Sparrow by Janette Oake. I read this one very quickly, I think just after I filmed my mid-month wrap-up. This one is a reread for me, and this one is about Berta, who is feeling very unlovable, essentially, compared to her sister Glenna, who is very charming and sweet, and her mother calls her like sunshine, and Glenna's the dependable one. And so Glenna feels very unlovable, and they're very much compared to each other all of their lives, essentially. But as they grow up, Berta has to really take on the reins of a lot of situations. And I really enjoyed this one again on the reread. I think it just held so much nostalgia for me. As a kid, I felt so, I don't know, so ostracized. I had a lot of bullies in my life, from my church life and from different groups I was a part of, like on my street in my neighborhood, who would treat me like a lot of ways like this, and I just felt like the dependable one in a lot of situations too. So I really connected to Berta as a child and like as a teenager. So I really love this one. I would even call this one a middle grade, to be honest. I think it is because it says classics for girls, and I think that this one would be considered a middle grade. So I highly recommend it for that. And it was just so interesting, and like to look at it again through an adult's lens. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. It does follow them as they grow up, and they have to, like, Berta has to learn to embrace herself, but also learn to love herself and learn to love her sister, and embrace her sister and for the differences that they have together. So I think it's a really great one and really fast read, at least for me when I just needed a fast read. So there we go. That definitely was something I needed. So the rest of the books will be ebooks or audiobooks. And so the first one of those is 1 Samuel from the Bible. This one is one of the history books, which I really enjoy learning about the history of ancient Israel through these eyes. I think it's always interesting how God never tells us, like through these testaments or through these books, what he thinks of the actions. He just tells us the actions. So I think it's really interesting, and I always love that. So for Samuel I finished. And the next one was Good Morning Monster by Catherine Gildiner. This one I really enjoyed and I have talked about it a lot. This one's a nonfiction by a counselor or therapist, and she talked about 5 different clients that she's had over the years where she discussed their trauma with them and helped them to find emotional success and thrive in spite of their very, very traumatic childhoods. And I can't stress it enough when I say that every single trigger warning is on this book, but it is an incredible book of strength and survival. It's incredible, but at the same time, you have to walk in there knowing that like everything is present in this book. Like every kind of abuse, every kind of situation is present, and it's every kind of violence, every kind of everything. So she talked about each client in their own storyline, and she would go from the time she met them all the way up through the time that she was finished working with them after like 3 or 5 years, however long their journey was with her. And then she would also finish it off with kind of an epilogue about when she would go back to them and ask for their permission to write their story, and then she would move on to the next person's story. So it was a very concise way of formatting the book, which I really enjoyed, and I felt like it was a really easy format to follow. I highly recommend it if you're at all interested in the psychology of it all, or the survival, or the childhood aspect. It was gut punching and really traumatizing, but at the same time it was just incredible to see the strength and the resilience of all these 5 people. One book that I do not have for you is one I had to return to my library, which was Finding My Talk: How 14 Native Women Reclaimed Their Lives After Residential Schools by Agnes Grant. This one is very interesting as it is about these 14 women after their stories. They all have different encounters with the residential schools. It is also something I've talked about incredibly on my channel. They had many different experiences they all talk about in their own chapters. From the time that some of them were born, some of them actually one person talked about their own grandfather or great-grandfather, all the way up. So it's different. Every chapter is different, and each family has sometimes different reasons for sending their child to the residential school. It's all very personal, and then at the same time, it's all very saddening. It's all very traumatizing. It is very relevant and very important. So I think it's something that's very important to read. There are no ebooks or audiobooks available, but I highly recommend buying a copy or finding one for your library to purchase, like asking your library to purchase one or finding one at your library. Yeah, it's very incredible. And I also want to make this of note because it's something that we always want to do with finding own voices, where Agnes Grant is not an own voice. However, all of the women in the book are own voices, and Agnes Grant sought out all these women. And the foreword actually states that, and the foreword was by, I believe, an Ojibwe woman. I can't remember if she was Cree or Ojibwe. I believe it was Ojibwe. And she states that Agnes Grant is amplifying their voices. So I think that's an incredible thing, that even though Agnes Grant is not a woman of color or an Indigenous woman, that she's still amplifying their voices, and that is still an incredible book to read because of that. And it was written in 2005, so it's so old, but yet it is still so relevant. I realize now that I had forgotten one Jane Austen book, which was Jane Austen at Home by Lucy Worsley. This was my nonfiction book for Jane Austen, and I really enjoyed this one. I read it with Berna from Berna's Bookish Adventures, so she'll be linked down below as well. This one I gave 4 stars to. I can't remember if I've been ranking these. This one was 4 stars, 5 stars. I'm not ranking the letters, 5 stars, and then the collection was 4 stars. And then the collection of 14 Women was 4 stars. I just wanted more in regards to length, but I think it was really great. And then the Good Morning Monster was 5 stars. Gotta keep track of these. Anyways, Jane Austen at Home was really interesting. I really liked the perspective of Jane Austen, how she talks about homes in books, and how that is really an interesting way to look at her novels. I have never done that, and it really opened my eyes to certain things in Persuasion, to certain things in Mansfield Park, or even Pride and Prejudice, or how she lived her life. I hadn't really thought of it in that way, so I was really intrigued by that, to be honest. I do know lots about Jane Austen's life. I have joined the Jane Austen Society of North America since COVID, and I am really learning a lot, but at the same time, when that's the case, it's like, it's just something where some of the information was not new to me. But however, after the first, I don't know, 100 pages, I learned a lot more information. So I definitely am giving it 4 stars. I think it was a really well done biography and I really enjoyed it. I'm definitely loving the audiobook. I thought that was a really great one to listen to. However, it did not have a PDF form of the pictures, and I got the physical book from the library, so I had the pictures and I sent them to Berna so she could enjoy them as well. I think it's worth it to get your hands on a physical copy if you're going to listen to it. I have 2 more books to talk about, and then that's it. These 2 were both middle grade, and I finally finished one of them, which was Chitty Chitty Bang Bang by Ian Flemming. I finally finished that, and I had been wanting to finish that this month. I have loved the movie since I was a kid, and actually the worst villain in my entire memory of my childhood was the child catcher from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. So I was excited to read Chitty Chitty Bang Bang and see how they compared, and boy were they different. I mean, you know they're going to be different, but boy were they different. Wow. I also have got to say that if I had not known that the author was the same as James Bond, I would have guessed that they were the same as James Bond, because it felt like James Bond in a children's book. It felt the same. It was at the beginning a little slow. It was the same as the movie a little bit. It was like different because the mom's not dead. In the book, you have the family of 4. You have Colonel Potts, who is not just Mr. Potts like the movie. So you have Colonel Potts and his wife Mimsy and the 2 kids, Jeremy and Jemima, and they find this car because he managed to sell a good invention. And so they buy this car, and then the 2 kids go off to boarding school, and when they come back, the car is magically fixed, or the car's all better, and they go off on this drive, and suddenly this drive takes them on a crazy adventure. That's kind of where it took off into James Bond-esque style. I have read Casino Royale before, and it felt very similar in strangeness, or very similar in like spy, espionage, like booby traps, and like, you just gotta read it to understand. It felt very James Bond-like, and I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I think it's a really fun book to read. However, I was like, this is a little old for, like, I don't know. It felt a little mature in some of the things, but maybe I work with 2-year-olds, so maybe I'm the one who's wrong. I don't know. It was just funny because when I was reading, I was like, yeah, this feels like a shoot 'em up book, but written for kids. So what do I say? I don't know. It was funny. And then the last book that I read was Dingeos at Dinnertime by Mary Pope Osborne. This was book 20 in the Magic Treehouse series. I needed to read a book for Australia, or the Oceania area, the continents, for the Olympics-a-thon, which is still going on right now. It's almost over when you're seeing this, but I wanted to find something, and I'm still looking for something currently that's kind of thing that region, that's from an author, that's by an author from that region. However, this fit in a pinch, and so I figured why not. This one was good. It was a lot about the nature and the animals, but also about the wildfires. And I mean, hey, I feel the smoke, and I could like literally taste the smoke as I live where there's forest fires going on right now. So it was very fitting, very atmospheric, but it was good, and I felt like it was really teachable. So I think I gave that one 4 stars as well. So for the Summertime Reads Readathon, I read this Tea Drinking Society for Pride Month and for under 200 pages. I read Mansfield Park for over 400 pages and for a different country, for a beach read, and for a book that makes you feel hot because it was a romance and kind of smutty romance, which I skipped over because that's not my cup of tea. I read Act Your Age, Eve Brown. For a book that it has an outside setting, I read Starfish because it's about her swimming in the pool all the time. And then for a book that was yellow or red on the cover and food on the cover, I read Good Morning Monster because it has an egg on the cover with a bright yellow yolk. So perfect. Then for middle grade magic, I did read 3 books for that, which was a Take You Out of This World book, which was Vacation Under the Volcano, and then a queer book, which was The Tea Dragon Society, a book in verse, which was The Starfish, and that was also a book about family, and then a book with tropes you love, which is like nonfiction, I guess I would call that. I put the Jane Austen book, which was Ordinary Extraordinary Jane. So yeah, that was that. Whew. That was a lot of words just now. So I definitely had a good reading month in spite of my brain trying to sabotage me and my stress trying to sabotage me. But I'm hoping that you had a good reading month in spite of whatever might have happened. I heard it was kind of slumpy for a lot of people. So please let me know down below if you had a good reading month or if it was slumpy too. But if it was slumpy, at least tell me what your favorite book was, because at least we should have favorites, right? I hope so. I definitely think my favorite was Starfish this month. That was like one of the best books I've read this year. And if you haven't, you should check out my review of my mid-month wrap-up. It was so good. I think it was my last book I reviewed, but you should check that out. It was just the best book I've read so far this year. Maybe not the best, but it's up there. Anyways, I hope you let me know what your favorite book is in the comments. You can also like this video if you enjoyed it and subscribe if you are new here. And I'll see you next time in another video. Bye for now.